Test. Martinez.
Hafiday and good afternoon. Let's go ahead and start. I apologize for the slight delay. It's 6 after 1. Thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. This is the first of 2 meetings that will be happening. This meeting is a work session. It's neither an oversight nor is it an official public hearing. Really, it's meant to facilitate discussions on issues surrounding, or at least close to, those fisheries policies and practices in the Hagåtña Basin area. If you haven't been tracking in the news in the last 4 weeks, there have been some concerns about issues of jurisdiction, maybe even some questions about the efficacy or why we do what we do in the Hagåtña Basin area. Different stakeholder groups weighing in both on the government side, on the private side. While it's a recent concern, at least as far as the mass media is concerned, this is a long-standing issue, and the chief of the port and I have discussed this. I think if anybody goes back in the record, this has been ongoing, not just in Hagåtña Basin, but in terms of protecting our natural resources, particularly the marine resources and fisheries 5-8 years ago. So that's as far as my research has been taking me. The purpose of this meeting is to serve as a free, an open, and an impartial forum. Impartial, and I have to say that because I know almost everybody at the table. And I gotta tell you, I'm probably the youngest one at the table. And so I'm gonna encourage my elders, my saina, tiyuhu, hagulokwi to you. A lot of you are very frank. You have no filter, and that's okay. I'm just gonna ask that we respect one another when we speak. If you must direct your excited comments, Chief, I'm wide open to that. I was raised in a pretty old-fashioned Chamorro family, and I think I can take it. But other than that, you have the general public watching. You probably have children watching. And so I want to encourage you just to be mindful and exercise proper decorum. That is not meant to filter how you feel or what you want to say. Just remain within the confines of what we believe to be appropriate for a listening audience. We have agency heads here at the table. We have fishers enthusiasts here. I have a scientist here. We have conservationists here. We have the media here. We have folks from the fishing industry, both for your personal take, but also for some of you represent commercial interests. I see some lead officials from the Department of Agriculture. So almost everybody who had a say or wants to have a say, it has been invited, and they're here. Again, I received a lot of phone calls and a lot of text messages. The meeting today, I want to recognize, I'm sorry, I'm beside myself. While I acknowledge my elders and my relatives, I want to acknowledge the mayor of Hagåtña. He's here. Thank you so much, Mayor. I know you have a busy schedule. thank you for at least sitting in to listen. This meeting was not designed to, again, just for the record, for everyone's interest, to meet only with government officials or those who I may have been perceived to be weighing in on, to give them the upper hand before 5 p.m. So we'll be meeting with some of you folks tomorrow night. My staff and they'll volunteer, and I will be there from 5 o'clock, Chief, to 6:30 tomorrow night on site at the Hagatnya Boat Basin area. We'll provide a 10 by 10 and some fold-out chairs, and if we could, we'd like to go ahead and provide some light refreshments as well. If Michael Duenas was here, I would joke we'd ask him for some sashimi and maybe some kelaguna tulay, but he's not, so it's okay to pick on my friend. I want to acknowledge, thank you, Vice Speaker Senator Therese is here. Happy Labor Day, ma'am. I saw you, at least photos of you two on Labor Day grounds. Thank you for being here. I try to pass myself off as an advocate for Chamorro culture and heritage. I try to practice the language, and so I made a few notes so that I could set things in the proper context. But if Mr. Taitano or anybody else wants to correct me, by all means, that's okay. Este be sangani hamzu no antes be tutun este na junta by na tungo todos hamzu ni mangagi guini dan todo ni manekanguksia na put para izahita ni mantautauta ni para umeresi este na punto. Gaigi I responsibly gizahita na para taprotehi adahi zampatika I kutrata kosaki todo fam beneficia para I manaulik I tanota zantodo I mantautauta. Pareo para todo sia ni umaaluk na esti I sagania I zaguahan. Sorry, Felix, I thought you were raising your hand to ask me a question to interpret. I was about to say, I don't know half of what I just said. No, just kidding. Listen, in English, for those who weren't tracking or if I completely destroyed that, I just want to remind us with all sincere humility that it's us that are the keepers and the guardians of our natural resources, that it falls on us, especially this great Chamorro nation of ours, to police ourselves, to protect the gifts that have been given to us, to perpetuate our traditional ways, in order that we can all freely benefit from it. Everybody, not just the Chamorro people, but everybody who calls Guam their home. And with that said, I'd like to ask that we proceed in the spirit of inafa malik and respeto. So let me go ahead and open up and maybe just ask the public officials here at the table if they want. There's no particular order. We just exercise some discretion when we raise each other's hands. Again, I'd like to ask some questions, and the Vice Speaker can assist me on issues of jurisdiction. I know that it depends on who you talk to, that issue of port jurisdiction versus Parks and Recs jurisdiction versus agriculture's jurisdiction in terms of management of the fisheries comes to mind. But with that said, you know, I also want to ask what some of the real issues are with the fishers. And again, I just ask that we proceed in the spirit of inafa malik and respect. Anybody want to go first? Maybe Felix, I did read the Guam Code, and maybe the Port Authority can weigh in either through yourself, General Manager, Deputy GM, or the Chief of the Assistant Chief of the Ports. If you want to comment very briefly in terms of the Port Authority's jurisdiction and its recent opinion in terms of the use of the Hagatnya Bay, unless you want to defer to Mr. Taitano.
No, I'd just like to know who.
Sure. Thank you. And that speaks to my being a freshman senator. Let's go ahead and, if you don't mind, you're going to press the button here until something red turns up. That means you're live. Please, for the record, introduce yourselves. A lot of good friends. We'll go, if you don't mind, we're going to go, I guess this would be counterclockwise, right? And so we'll go this way, counterclockwise, around the table and then around. So starting with you, Felix, if you can introduce your name, your title, and your organization if you're here in official capacity.
Good afternoon. My name is Felix Regis. I am the chair for the Western Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Council Guam Advisory Panel.
I'm Judy Amesbury. I'm an archaeologist with an interest in fishing, and I'm also active with the Fishery Management Council.
I'm Teresa Lahi, Senator.
Janice Mendiola.
Gerald Taitano.
I'm Assistant Chief Chris Roberto with the Port Authority of Guam Police and the
co-chair to the Area Maritime Security Committee.
Felix Pangilinan, Deputy General Manager to Operations with the Port. This moment, I'm also the Acting General Manager.
Brent Tibbetts, Fisheries Biologist, Guam Department of Agriculture, DAWR.
Ruben Olivas, fishing enthusiast, invited by Senator Castro.
Peter Hauk, fisheries scientist from the University of Guam Marine Laboratory.
If we could maybe just get an opening comment, maybe from the port, with respect to, I guess, the recent letter or memoranda that had been issued with respect to your jurisdiction. Just some.
Okay, on behalf of the General Manager, I'd like to make this statement. Although there was a letter generated back in the day, June 20th, 2013, I did see this memo, and when I showed this to the General Manager, her question was, under what authority did the General Manager at the time, back in 2013, and the Department of Agriculture's director have to put this memo together and enact it when it goes against the law, meaning it's not with the spirit of the law. So, that being said, regards to the port's position on the marina rules and regulations, we will remain neutral in this discussion. We are not for either party. There's two parties here, to just clarify that. One is the netters, and one are the anglers. So the port's position is that we are just going to enforce what's in our current rules and regulations that has not been changed or ratified or amended in any way, at least not in our knowledge. In that, I'd like to turn it over to the Chief of Deputy or Assistant Chief of Police. He has some comments that he'd also like to make.
Afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. Some points for clarification. Being a traditional fisherman myself, or at least at one time practiced it until it broke my grandfather's heart. There are some things that I must do in my capacity, and I must educate and inform the public that yes, there are laws and regulations that are put out and put forth, and I did not enact them. The Port Police, in its position, can only enforce. We will try to do it with as much dignity and respect as we can, so long as I'm at the helm, and I'm sure as whoever follows me. But we understand that there are some issues, perhaps some feelings about it, but we hold ourselves neutral. We ask that you educate yourselves, refresh yourselves, read Title 12 of the Guam Code Annotated, and to include the marina rules and regulations. Other big issues that we need to look at is Title 33 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which requires the Port Authority of Guam to perform certain functions as it relates to its properties. Now, the Port of Guam's properties are in several locations on the island, and I'm sure you know them. Agat Marina, Hagatnya Marina, the Port of Guam, Outer Harbor, Harbor of Refuge, Gerberville. And those are our jurisdictions. And they require the port to do things. It empowers me to enforce the law. We hold no grudges against anybody. We are a law enforcement entity, and we will perform as the people of Guam expect us to. We ask for nothing. We give nothing. We provide you as much respect as we can, understanding the issues. And so we sit here as the acting general manager has said, we stand neutral. But holding those references, I ask that you review them and understand the position that the port must take. Thank you.
So that was the Port Authority's position with respect to jurisdiction. I see Tino Ugan. Are you representing the director from Ag today? Brent, okay. All right. Okay, so I have my follow-up commentary about the Port Authority statement, but before we go into it, Mayor Havaganya, did you want to provide any comment? Anybody, I guess it's pretty much anybody else, Vice Speaker, if you have any questions or comments. If not, I'll open it up to everyone else. We can always come back to you, ma'am.
Is it the port's position that their rules and regs are inconsistent with this memo from 2013? We don't have a copy of your rules and regs in our packet. Is that available?
I did not bring a copy of it, but oh, I have that. I have this. Everybody has this. Thank you, Mr.
Is it your position that your rules and regs are inconsistent with this memo? Because this memo purports to, I think, concede to the port's authority and that it shall, all net fishing activities shall be in accordance with Guam fishing laws and regulations.
Yes, it is contradictory to the port's rules and regulations because when I had presented this to our general manager, she only had one question. Under what authority did the general manager of the Port Authority at that time and the director of agriculture have to generate this memo, which is contradictory to law? First, let me say the marina, definition of marina in the marina rules and regulations is from the mouth of the channel that leads into the marina all the way into the slips. Okay, so that entire area is considered marina. I understand in the 12 GCA, Title 12, it talks about marina proper. Well, I've done some research in regards to the ownership of the marina. In all official documentation, there is nothing in there that I've found that describes marina proper than marina improper, or in regards to any piece of area within the marina. Its definition is the marina starts from the entrance to the channel all the way in to the slips. So where 12 GCA got marina proper and then certain parties trying to reestablish what marina proper is, there's no definition that I found that indicates that the outer basin or the inner basin is considered marina proper. It's the entire area.
Okay, so the question from one of the participants in the back, she doesn't have a mic, is she's referencing, may I, Dr. Hulk? She's referencing this particular map that was provided, I guess it's an official document from land management, and I don't know if you heard the question, Mr. Pangilinan or the assistant chief. How were they able to establish those lines? And my follow-up question would be, is this consistent with your definition of marina in terms of jurisdiction? Because that was my follow-up question regarding the outer boat basin versus, I guess, the inner boat basin. But without any other information that would define marina outside of what the assistant GM has done, I'll give him the opportunity to respond, and then we have a comment. As a matter of fact, if I could encourage folks who have some comments, you're more than welcome to come up here, only so that we can hear you. Any follow-up, Felix, on that one?
Okay. In response to your question, how is it that this map has been registered with land management and everything? I'm assuming that it was on the guise of the letter that was written between the general manager of the port and the director of agriculture. Again, absent the change in law, does this memo make this map official? I can't answer that question. I'll leave that up to the legislature to make that determination in regards to whether it is or it is not. Again, my general manager's position on this, and maybe if there's smarter minds here that can clarify that, we want to know under what authority did either of these two department heads have to put this together and make that agreement.
If I can just comment, it's my understanding that government agencies generally have rule-making authority. Laws are not designed to be specific as to I's that are dotted and T's that are crossed. It leaves considerable leeway for the administering government entity to develop rules and regulations. Now, I understand that the fishing nowadays being done, the net fishing is sanctioned. And unless the current Port Authority general manager develops another rule, another regulation to supersede that, we go by what's existing. Joanne Brown should have known that, being a prior legislator. If she wants to change those rules, she can, again, based on her rule-making authority, as general manager of the Port Authority, she could do that. But she hasn't done that. Therefore, we go with what is currently existing.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge my colleague, Senator Telena Nelson, and happy Labor Day. And I know you're on Labor Day grounds too, and Vice Speaker was, so thank you for joining us. This is a work session, and feel free to jump in at any time.
Yes, could I just follow up then? Okay, so I passed out this 5 GCA 63116, and in here is the only law that I could find where they talk about, again, your boat basin proper, the channel, the mooring area, and they delineate these different areas. And they're talking specifically about what fishing is allowed in which areas. So I'm wondering if the port has rules and regulations that are inconsistent with this law. I wish I could see a copy of those, yeah.
What the Marina Rules and Regulations does state is that there is no net fishing within the marina. It doesn't clarify, again, in regards to 12 GCA and this rule, 5 GCA, the taking of fish. Marina proper, what is that? It is nowhere found in any Port Authority official document. Moving forward, I would say they contradict each other.
If this has been a long-standing issue, Mr. Chair, is there any legal documentation? Has it been interpreted? Whether this provision of law overrules the rules and regulations, or have they been interpreted to be inconsistent, or are they interpreted to be consistent? Does anyone have any kind of legal opinion or legal interpretation of this from past history? Does Department of Agriculture have that?
And that's a great question, ma'am.
Confusion amongst these people that want to be like me, but only can afford the $36 cost US special rod and reel. Now, that memo was written after the 38th time I got arrested, and Joanne Brown was nowhere around. I believe she was still a sitting senator, could have been. But the whole thing of it is, it was written as a compromise between the government, the angler fishermen, and the net fishermen. It was a compromise. Hey, let's get along. Let's do what we can together, because we all got time in the water. And the thing of it is, it's developed now to the point where now Miss Brown wants to prove herself to the point that she is all powerful. Everything that was written there was written under the guise of the government, with the blessings from Fish and Wildlife, from every entity and agency that was involved in this. And I'm the one who they drag in and they make the example of. And we came to a compromise. Before this happened, the last couple of weeks, when all these crying babies and cluckers from the boat basin came out, they were accusing us of killing fish. They were accusing us of this and that. The Port Authority came down and they saw we were well within the required limits. As you can see by that registered map from land management that came from the government of Guam. Now, this didn't fall out of the sky, and if Mrs. Brown doesn't want to recognize what's right and what's wrong, her being a senator was all in frugality. Because it's for the people, of the people, by the people, and we are the people. Fishermen are not politicians. We're not senators. So if it was supposed to have gone from law, from memorandum to law, then that's the politicians' fault. We don't have time to play politics. Same as the farmers, in which I've been farming as long as I've been fishing. And once again, I'm going to say, I didn't learn this in the Philippines or Palau, Chicago, Miami, New York, or Seattle. I lost it. I got this from my forefathers. They passed it down to me. This is interred in my bones. What idiot would get arrested 38 times in the boat basin? Each and every time. And the only legal term I know, I was exonerated. I asked the judge, what does exonerated mean? Go out and you can do it again because you're not guilty. This is all about that memo, to me. If the government's not going to live up to its expectations, and as far as the port police are concerned, you arrested me the last 3 times, but yet you failed to do your duty in regards to the public safety of the boaters and the people of Guam. Because each and every night, we camp down there. We retired old men, we have our last beer down there. And every night, we see the Chuukese going in and out, no license, no trailer lights, no safety requirements aboard their boats, and the Port Authority's doing its job? Excuse me, I'm pulling all the hot irons out of the fire because this is not just about me. The Port Authority, Miss Brown, you're wrong. Port Police, yeah, that's a nice boat you brought down there, but you got somebody qualified to drive it? I hope so. And as far as the legal authorities and the politicians, look at what it is. Why do you want to nitpick? We came to a compromise and a partial solution which was good at one time. Let's do it again. Because if not, I'm going to be arrested tomorrow. I'll tell you that for a fact. If the fish come in and I can grab it, I'm going to grab it for the people of Guam, not for me.
I think that's probably a good segue into what should be the next part of the discussion. Unless my colleagues feel otherwise, you know, this is a new body, and I think I've heard it from the two senators. This is a new group of legislators, and we can all acknowledge that there are laws in the books that are either antiquated or conflicting. And I've asked specialists in the area, advocates, enthusiasts to come forward and listen in on this conversation, whether it's one about jurisdiction or one about the spirit of the law that determines really what traditional fishery practice is. I'm not talking about the methodology. We're talking about the spirit of the law in terms of subsistence or take. We're trying to advocate, at least a few of us who helped write the provisions within the Marine Conservation Act, which is essentially a community-based fisheries management strategy that will allow us to come together and define or clarify some issues of policy, whether it's the proper part of the marina or the outer part, or in the event that it's never been asked in the courts, to at least stipulate what the stakeholder group has to put on the table in terms of acceptable fishery practices and areas or demarcations of where these types of practices can occur. I think the law is silent in one or more areas, but the law is also very specific as well in terms of commercial fishing. But I don't want to go into it. I wanted to, from my end, in terms of my soapbox, I wanted to maybe get the opinion of actually the chief authority of all fish and game, which is not the Port Authority of Guam, but I'd like to hear what the Department of Agriculture's opinion might be, whether it's from an ecosystem perspective or maybe even from a legal regulatory perspective. So either Tino Uggan or Brett.
We've actually looked at it and said, and actually concluded it does need updating. And unfortunately, we have this issue, and we're seeing there are a lot also issues related to the different fishing methods that are being utilized in a small area. And unfortunately, there is that conflict. And we, as far as the division need to do, we need to go back and really go back and promulgate some rules and regulation in that regard. I think that's what needs to happen. Unfortunately, when we're dealing with it now, it becomes an issue, oh, that's against us now. And unfortunately, there's no way around that, unfortunately, at this point. And we've talked about jurisdiction. The Port Authority has the jurisdiction in there, and that goes without saying. And so I think what we need to do is move forward, find the solution that's going to do it, do the promulgation through GAR, Guam government rules and regulations, and then put forth something that the public will say, okay, that's good. Because unless we do that, I think there's going to be much suspicion or mistrust throughout all this the two-line season, You know, talk about a cornucopia, you know, you think that would be, but unfortunately we're at this point. So I think what we need to do is do that and then move that forward and see how the public receives that. Any other way, I believe it's just going to be met with a lot of mistrust, and I think we've done that already. We don't need to go down that road anymore. Anyway, that's my 2 cents as far as this goes. Thank you.
That was Tino Uggan. Oh, I see. They were trying to capture his voice. That was Tino Uggan from Department of Agriculture. I think he's the Division Chief Conservation Officer.
Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources.
Division of Aquatic Life and Resources. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Tino. Mr. Taituno, unless there are questions from my colleagues, the 2 senators here, has a prepared statement. Before we miss the opportunity, do you want to go ahead and share it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't really quite sure what the forum of today's gathering is going to be, so I did prepare a statement, but based on what the chairman said, it's going to be an open, free, open, and impartial discussion. I don't know if I can be impartial. I am a Chamorro, and when it comes to Chamorro issues, culture, I am not impartial. I'm, in fact, very strong on cultural preservation. I'm hearing that the Port Authority needs to define, or at least needs to clarify rules and regulations regarding Agana Marina and what is the Agana proper or Marina proper. I'm hearing that Department of Agriculture has outdated rules and regulations that they need to work on. In government agencies, in government generally, if you have a rule, or if an agency that can issue regulations finds itself having inadequate rules and regulations, then we revert to a status quo. And the status quo is we can drop our net where we dropped it last year and the year before without hassle, without harassment. Now, in rulemaking, okay, what we need to do as rulemakers, or what you guys need to do as recommending officials to the rulemakers, is you have to take a look at our past for you to determine what future, what our path is going to be in the future. You have to look at your history. You know, what are the issues? What is the culture like? Okay? You just can't do a rule, copy something from California or Oregon or Arizona, and then apply to Guam. It doesn't work that way. You need to know your history before you get to where you want to go in this culture. As I mentioned before, my name is Gerald Taituno. I am a resident of Chalampago, Guam. I am a Chamorro fisherman and a strong advocate of allowing Chamorros to engage freely in traditional fishing, either etupak, which is fishing by line, pisaw, which is fishing pole, tsintsulu, which is net, tekin, which is gill net, talaza, which is your throw net, or other methods of pesca, which is the general term for all kinds of fishing. Fishing was one of the most important subsistence activities in ancient Chamorro society. The Chamorros relied on their fishing skills to obtain fish, shellfish, turtles, and other marine resources necessary for their survival. Of course, nowadays, we no longer catch turtles. They have become our brothers of the sea. Early historical accounts of the ancient Chamorros described the natives as very skilled fishermen. Fish and other foods from the sea not only provide a source of sustenance for the Chamorro people, but they were also important culturally, providing natural materials for tools and commodities for trade, or for gifts. But not everyone in ancient Chamorro society engaged in fishing activities. The ancient Chamorros had strict rules about who could fish and where. Fishing from boats and deep-sea fishing were men's activities, and these were skills learned at a very young age. Fathers would teach their sons beginning around the age of 4 or 5, taking them out in smaller versions of the large outrigger canoes, or the segments. By the time sons were young teenagers, they knew enough to be able to go out to sea in their own boats and fish by themselves. Access to particular fishing grounds was regulated by clans. Different fishing grounds had names and ownership of the area of ocean, and associated reefs was organized around matrilineal lines of descent. Violation of these boundaries was punishable, sometimes by death. Wars between clans would be fought to gain access to particular fishing grounds. I mention that because this is how serious this thing is if we don't control it and if we don't regulate it. Fishing was so important in ancient Chamorro society that even the calendar was influenced by fishing seasons. The ancient Chamorro calendar consisted of 13 lunar cycles, somewhat equivalent to the months in the modern calendar. For example, the month Umataraf, which is March in the modern calendar, was a time to fish for guatifi, or the snapper. The 13th month, Umatahaf, was a time to catch hagaf, or rock crabs or crayfish. Ideally, February to April were good months for fishing for sezon, or rabbitfish, tiao, baby goatfish, and satmonente, which is the larger goatfish. May to June were months for net fishing for tiao and manahag, or baby rabbitfish. July through September for i'i, baby jackfish, tiao, and tariquito, which is your medium-sized jackfish. July through October for atulay and atsuman, a small tuna-like fish, and November to January for using spear and torch methods to catch mafuti. These are emperors, kind of a snapper. Guili, which is rudderfish, and palaxi, which is parrotfish. These are seasonal activities, and the Chamorros must take advantage of them or lose the opportunity for another year. We've been waiting for that atulay for 3 years. Okay, if we lose it now, which is exactly what is happening, we are prevented from dropping the net and catching the fish. We won't see this maybe for another 3 years. Fishing was both an individual and a communal activity for the ancient Chamorros. The Chamorros worked together to catch fish and then share their catch with other members of the village. The etupak, or line, and the pisao, the pole fishermen, typically do not share their catch outside the immediate family because it's not enough. It's just self-subsistence. The net fisherman does, as the catch is more labor-intensive and requires communal effort to be successful. One man cannot catch a school of fish. It has to be communal, and typically we would have 25, 30, maybe even 35 people helping, and each getting a patti, because that's culture. We don't sell the fish, we pass it around. Anyone who helps with the net shares in the catch. Historically, the individual fisherman yields to the net fisherman as the entire community benefits from the catch. The catch is bigger. Conflicts in fishing are not new. As I had mentioned, Chamorro clans will fight among themselves to gain access to particular fishing grounds. Then the missionaries came, and conflicts between Christianity and ancient Chamorro culture began. This led to great changes in the traditions of Chamorro fishermen, many who would eventually exchange their maritime skills and fishing implements for land-based skills in agriculture and farm tools. I remember helping my dad at our ranch in Mangilao. Before that, we were fishing. We had a small bull that eventually became a big bull. too big for this 12-year-old to handle. My dad installed an goza, a ring around the nose. That allowed me to lead the bull wherever I wanted him to go. Well, with the arrival of the Spanish missionaries, an goza was placed around the Chamorros to lead them away from the ocean to an agrarian lifestyle where they were more easily converted to Catholicism. But even with that, reliance on and respect for the ocean and its resources remain an important part of the Chamorro cultural history. In the ancient Chamorro mindset, the ocean was theirs, a part of their creation. There is an old account of a shipwrecked Spaniard who asked the Chamorros, "Who made the earth, the sky, and the ocean?" The Chamorros replied that the Chamorros made the ocean, as the Chamorros sailed the ocean and they fished the ocean. The Spaniard, whose name was Sanchez, thought the answer was foolish. And the Chamorros thought Sanchez was a fool for even asking who made the ocean. This mindset is re-emerging in today's more educated and more militant Chamorro. Senators, I ask, or committee members, I ask that you recommend to the rulemakers, the senators, that you allow the Chamorro to engage freely in traditional fishing. I beg you, do not allow the Chamorro to lose their fishing skills. Do not deny the Chamorros fish and other foods from the sea. Do not deny the Chamorros natural materials from the sea for tools and commodities. Do not create or endorse restrictive rules about how, when, and where the Chamorros can fish. Do not deny the Chamorros teaching their sons and daughters how to fish. And do not restrict the Chamorros from engaging in traditional net fishing. Zangin man agugud sa hamzo. Put for board. Lankngus. If someone has placed the ring around your nose, please take it off. Si Diyos maasya. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taitano. I know that Ruben Olivas wants to provide some input. I just want to draw reference to Public Law 29-127. Tribute goes to former Senator Judy Guthertz, who is an extreme advocate of traditional fishing rights. And so she introduced a provision which has been recorded in the statute that does allow for indigenous fishing rights. And while I won't require the Department of Agriculture to respond right away, maybe after, if you feel, I do have a follow-up question, and I'll pass it on to the other respective agencies within the administration on the status of the Indigenous Native Resources Task Force. And so I just wanted to draw your attention to that, Mr. Taitano, if you weren't already familiar. And so maybe I can move on. If you have a follow-up, yeah.
I'm familiar with that, but I'm also of the opinion that nothing really substantial has come out of that, okay? You know, during campaigns, we say, we're all for Chamorro rights, we're all for indigenous fishing, and we pass a law or introduce a bill, and nothing becomes of it because the election is over, I've won, so I don't need to address the issue for another 2 years. Well, like I said, the Chamorros are not that stupid anymore, you know? We're starting to become really, really militant, especially us children of the 60s, you know? I mean, you go to Chuk, you go to Palau, you go to Majuro, do you think that they allow the Chamorros to fish as freely as they do their own people? Guam is the only territory, Guam is the only island that allows almost any kind of fish, any amount of fish, anywhere, as compared to the other islands. They're more restrictive in their fishing. I, as a Chamorro, cannot go down to Palau and just fish wherever I want. It's very restrictive, but we here seem to be more open. Well, you know, that has to change. We have to protect our indigenous rights.
Senator Castro, if I could respond to just a little of what you said, just add a little more depth to that issue under Public Law 127 on indigenous fishing. Actually, the Department of Agriculture submitted the rules and regulations at least a year ago. The unfortunate part of that whole process, I think what it is, and I feel for Mr. Taitano, and because we've kind of gone down that road multiple times. What it is, this is my own personal conclusion, so whatever it's worth, is that we are writing the U.S. government's rules and regulation, and at the same time we're trying to promote and perpetuate and strengthen the local Chamorro culture. And in that situation, what happens is that it's a conflict. We're supposed to be following the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, where all men are created equal. And then here in the island, we are faced with that, as well as trying to perpetuate and strengthen the Chamorro culture. The CNMI is of a different, they did their, the Commonwealth. So that in their agreement and the signing of that document placed them on a, those were negotiated items, I guess, in that situation. We, on the other hand, are functioning on a different government. You're nodding your head because I know I'm going with that, right? There you go. And so, because of that, we're an unincorporated territory. That's the bottom line. That puts us in a separate. All the Micronesian territories have negotiated their own document, and so they have that. We, unfortunately, are an unincorporated territory. That means we follow, by de facto, the U.S. Constitution. And so if we try to promote this stuff, guess what? The AG just gives us conclusions, said this is against the Organic Act, I guess is the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
I appreciate that. And I just want to recognize Senator Regine Bisco-Lee. Thank you. Lo antes no, Senor, right? I was trying to state for the record my impartiality to hearing all sides. Lo put edzuno mensenemo ni nayan na mo nhau na sineta ta fan chanda edzuno na paradigm lo to put edzuno na rason na magagio pago estisya na mangagi gesti na lamasa sembrabo fanano siya mas malagonya ta nai itoptauta edzuna chansa data bansa mo na no I lingwahi I katuran Chamorro lo pagwao angin pun fanyogi o pago put edzu then I will remove myself because that is a very emotional topic for me. But I thank you both for pulling that out. But this is not the forum for me to get on that soapbox. I do want to, Okajani, if I could real quick, I know that Ruben wants to get to his issue, but I do want to thank you both for that because it's a very powerful, passionate, and divisive line, but a line that we have to choose on where we stand. And I apologize to both of you for not giving you the credence for me to weigh in on that discussion. That was not the purpose of this open and roundtable, but don't mistake my impartiality for being afraid to stand on the side of the great Chamorro Nation. But I'm really here to discern matters of fact, statements of fact, and one's opinion about jurisdiction and to hear from you. Sure. And not necessarily, but I do beg your indulgence for having to weigh in emotionally, but I had to react to that because I am with you. Sure. I am with you in that discussion, and we can have that again. Ruben Olivas, thank you again, Mr. Taiton Dispensa. And then we'll go to Uncle John. I'm sorry, can we, Ruben, real quick, and then, or you're deferring? Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Tulay.
This
Johnny
in
Tulay.
conjunction with what Tino said. Tino came out with the political aspect as where we stand with the compact, impact, federated, non-federated, adjudicated, non-adjudicated, all those good words. But Brent will tell you, and that's verified, the outsiders have opened 18 fish stores in the last 3 years on our island. We've only had one existing fish facility, and that is our co-op for the last 25, 30, 35 years. What's the thinking going on? They've even facilitated to their advantage that they pilfered $1.2 million out of our food stamp program. What does that say to our mindset? I'm 72 years old. I'm ready to get out of this game, go do something else. I've been fishing since I was 7. My family's from Agana. We fished in Agana. Before they had any port authority or they had any rocks out there or buildups, my family was fishing out there. That's why I'm so devoted to my Agana. Now, if I'm doing something wrong, really wrong, and harvesting the fish, I'm not cultivating it. This is manna from heaven. Like Jerry said, this is the best catch in 3 years. It's my best catch in 25 years. And when you compare the difference between what we do as Chamorro cultured fishermen, I can catch the fish myself. Like Jerry says, you need a volume of people incorporated, trained to know what to do to bring in this harvest. You just don't go out and grab a bucket and take off. No, you gotta do this equivocally where everybody knows their part. And like I apologize to Tanana and Tusus up in Jigo and Jonia and the back roads that aren't available and don't have the capacity or the children to catch this fish and bring it to them. We do that. We do that. It's not about money, ladies and gentlemen. I had a heart attack, bypass, and all kind of surgery, and I'll tell you what, when I was dead for 6 hours, you're dead. Fishing, nothing matters. But when you're alive and you have this thing inculcated in your bloodstream and your brain, like Janus, like my man here, Vic Roman, Robbie Robinson, J.R. Hauser, we're all retirees, but trying to put a good crew together takes a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of moxie. My daughter, Sharita, she says, Dad, why do you do this? You get chastised. You're worse than Jesus on the cross getting hit by the Philistines. You know? Is it worth it? This is our culture. This is what's in our blood. And I've known all these gentlemen. I've known this guy for 100 years. I know everybody at this table except the young bloods and the pretty ones. I don't really know them. But this, all we're asking is the same compromise that was given to us 4 years ago. Allow us to do what we were doing until somebody disrupted it for whatever opinion that they developed on their own. We've done it twice already, and we were doing good. Then all of a sudden, thunder struck, and a lady got mad, and she wanted to incorporate her own thoughts and thinking. This was all put together by the government. It wasn't put together by me. I couldn't write a paragraph of this stuff. That's my education. But they put it together. You put it together. You put it together. Marine Lab, the senators put it together. Tino put it together. I didn't put it together. I say keep it together because it was registered with land management by our government. Excuse me, I'm going to go look for the North Korean ballistic missiles that's scheduled to be coming by in the next 20 minutes, so time for another cigarette.
Okay. Senator Lee, did you want to jump in, or maybe, okay, when you're ready, I'm sorry, I'll be Senator Nelson, Vice Speaker. Ruben, your mic, oh, sorry.
My name's Ruben Olivas. I'm not a part of any committee whatsoever. I'm just a fishing enthusiast. I've been fishing pretty much all my life, as far as I can remember. This is an issue that needs to be rectified. I mean, there's just so much confusion. One thing I learned just sitting here was that, I believe you're the general or deputy of the port? Okay. Even stated that there is some confusion as far as what is the marina proper and the outer basin. With that in mind, if you can't identify what's allowable by law here, which it does say net fishing in Public Law 63166, how can Mr. Taitano even be arrested? How do you arrest somebody when you can't say, well, you're in the proper? Because that's not identified in the law. There's no definition, just like the senators are saying. How do you identify that? Or outer marina. How would I be able to arrest him if I don't know where the outer marina is or what's defined as proper? Have you ever served time? Have you ever been convicted of those 36 or 38 times you've been arrested? Well, then apparently the judge agrees with you too then. I don't know. So that being said, I think, one, that the general orders of the Port Authority of Guam, section 10.05, that says no net or trap devices of any kind shall be used fishing in the marina, is in conflict with the law. Therefore, that can be cast aside. You cannot arrest anybody on something like that that's conflicting with the law. Because a rule and regulation, as we all know, cannot conflict with public law. We all know that. That being said, then, if we're going to be able to rectify this, we need to identify proper, the Agania Marina proper. That term needs to be identified, and by your own statement, and I already have researched quite a bit, it's not identified. So that term needs to be identified. If once that's identified, and also the outer basin, if you want to go by this memorandum between the Department of Agriculture and addressed to the Port Authority of Guam, then we can actually set specific boundaries where net fishing is allowed and where it's not allowed, so that we can clear up all this confusion. Because it's not about whether net fishing is allowed or not allowed. It's allowed. The law says it's allowed. Now it's a matter of where it's allowed. Where are those boundaries? We can't keep arresting people when we don't even know the boundaries. How do you do that? I retired from public safety, 40 years in public safety, a police officer in California, so I got a little bit of background about this. I know enough to know whether or not I can arrest somebody or not, you know, so I'm not just a fisherman or just somebody off the street, though, yeah, you could say I'm off the street, but we need to come up with a solution here, and I think a good starting point is being able to come up with definitions of what is the marina proper, and also the outer basin, seeing how those are the two terms that have been used that nobody can identify here in here. And if we can't, then we can't arrest anybody. If we can't even identify where you're allowed to fish and where you're not allowed to fish. You can't do that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Please, we have Ms. Ainsbury here, and then followed by Dr. Peter Hoke and any of the senators who want to jump in.
You know what happened with Judy Guthertz's bill to allow indigenous fishing rights? It passed the legislature, then it was vetoed by the governor, then it went back to the legislature, and they overrode the veto. So it is a law that Guam has indigenous fishing rights. But she didn't, in the bill, spell out what the rights would be, and it was up to Department of Agriculture to decide on what the rights would be. And they, I know, prepared draft after draft after draft and had meetings and so on, but actually nothing became of it, I guess because the Attorney General said, yeah, forget that. Okay, but there's other ways to do it that don't involve race. If you know how, I mean, I don't like being in a position of talking about this because I'm not the predominant race in Guam, but you know, because of that Dave Davis case and, you know, some other things, you know, we're finding out you can't do things according to race, you know, but you could allow indigenous fishing rights in some other way. And I don't necessarily know the way, but I know that the Fishery Management Council in Honolulu that has jurisdiction of Guam, and the CNMI also, you know, they have people who study indigenous fishing rights and who know ways that you could do it. For example, Guam never had fishing permits, right? Fishermen don't have to have permits in Guam. But if you wanted to allow some group of people certain rights, you could say everyone who gets a fishing permit by the year 2020 will never have to pay again, and people who come after that have to pay every year, or something like that. You know, I mean, there's ways you can give privileges to some people and not other people, but not based on race. And another way to do it would be zoning, you know, that you can do certain kinds of fishing in certain kinds of areas. So you would need somebody to decide, you know, what kind of fishing you should allow in this area and what kind of fishing you should allow in that area.
Thank you. Peter? Peter Hoke, UOG.
Thank you. I'll be brief, but I am no expert, and I've just been following this issue in the newspaper like everyone else. And I just wanted to use it as an example because oftentimes as the fishery develops and we keep on fishing and fishing, the decision-making in the management process becomes reactive. They react to a situation, and then when you are reactive like that, right, so there's never a good outcome. One side's always going to be mad at the other side, and if you go the other way, one side will always be mad. But the obvious solution to trying to buffer some of that is to be more proactive in our fisheries management and how we approach it. And I think in terms of doing that, I've been working with Tino and Brent and some of the guys, and what we've been trying to do is get a better handle on 25 years of fishing records that you guys have been submitting. And my angle is less on zoning and stuff like what Judy was talking about, but more on, well, how do species respond to fishing pressure? If I know how this species is going to respond, I can set a policy that matches that species. So that's some of the information we're generating, and we'll be happy to provide summaries of that in the near future. But I just wanted to say that some of that stuff that we're finding is kind of amazing to me, because when we start seeing how species are responding to fishing pressure, it starts to match the local traditional forms of management. Species that have more than one name, for instance, at different life stages. Well, we're starting to find that, well, you can harvest it at this range and nothing would happen to the population through time, but at this range, there is an issue. And so the names probably are matching with these things. And the more we learn about this and study these 25-year records, the more I see relationships with traditional forms of management and that weren't necessarily recorded. And because they weren't recorded, here we are figuring out some of these things 25 years later, as you might say. But my point here is that I think generally speaking, this issue ended up being a reactive issue. But I think moving forward, Guam fisheries are a big, big deal. And we want to switch it to a more proactive type approach. And I would love to be part of the process if this continues. We have some information to bring to the table. And I think that you can harmonize traditional management policies very well in what we're finding with the scientific findings. So it's not a matter of one or the other.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what's been said by, you know, the experts who are members of this committee, or what is it, thinking group. But just my reaction to the comments regarding how the Attorney General seems to always quash whatever we, you know, whatever is presented or a new initiative. You know, that's why I mentioned the story about the Atgoza, because the Atgoza only exists if you recognize it, okay? But I don't recognize the Atgoza with regard to the federal government telling me how to fish, when to fish. Studies are showing, you know, that if we follow traditional fishing and we harvest the fish that are seasonal, that the environment balances itself. Now, when we allow, with our adgodzas, we allow the federal government to control our fishing or to influence our fishing methodology, our fishing schedule, then we're screwing up the environment. It's the same thing with you know, back in the 60s, this whole thing with President Kennedy regarding Peace Corps. The Peace Corps came out to the Pacific and they attempted to teach island societies how to fish, how to plant potatoes, how to plant corn. It didn't work. You know, for a society to maintain its environment, its livelihood, its self-sustenance abilities, you gotta leave the indigenous people alone. And as long as we recognize that that we have an adgoza on us, we will be forever prevented from doing that. We need to somehow get rid of that adgoza. Okay, now there's some recommendations, fishing licenses, and don't tell my cousin Johnny we're gonna have fishing licenses, he's gonna go crazy. Zoning, maybe, you know, but again, please do not do anything or recommend anything that will limit the indigenous fishermen from fishing the traditional way. It's going to harm the environment. It's going to harm this island. It's going to harm the future of this island.
We're at the 2:15 mark. I know we called the work session for 1 to 2:30, and I want to give everyone an equal opportunity to express their sentiments or ask questions. So maybe we can go this way. Brad, did you want to add to the conversation? Please, I'm not twisting your arm.
Thank you. I think the only thing that I think that we're thinking of as the Department of Agriculture is that that kind of the feeling is that for this issue, the jurisdiction over where fishing happens or if fishing happens belongs to the port. And if fishing does happen, it's up to the department to make sure it's done in a way that's consistent with existing laws. So we're kind of sitting on the side and waiting to see what ultimately is resolved. I think the big part of the problem is just the confusion over the definition of the area and what's allowed or not. And I think reviewing by legal people would probably go a long way to resolving this. And I think the port, it sounds like, is willing to go with whatever legal decision is rendered if fishing is allowed or not. But that's not our jurisdiction, Department of Agriculture. What would be is if fishing is allowed, we would make sure that the fishing is done in a method that's consistent with current fishing rules and regulations. So we're kind of sitting on the side waiting to see how this is resolved.
Mr. Pangilinan, do you want?
I just want to make a comment in regards to, thank you, sir, for pointing that out in the confusion. In my mind, there is no confusion. I'm going with what is in the rules and regulations of the Port Authority Marina. And nowhere there does it state marina proper, but yet it gives a definition of marina. And the definition, again, of a marina is from the entrance of the channel leading into the marina all the way into the slips area. I'm not confused about marina proper. I don't know where the 12 GCA or 5 GCA got that. But in all the documents that I've looked at, official documents for the Port Authority's ownership over that marina, absent that, I can only go by what the definition is on the rules and regulations. Again, I am also a traditional fisherman. I want to make that clear also. But I'm also entrusted in a position of government that I must do what is on the books. I didn't formulate those rules and regulations. It was done way before my time as becoming a harbor master and now a deputy general manager. But my position is of enforcement. And I hope you're right, sir, that absent the definition of a marina proper, you think I like arresting fishermen? I went through a lot with my family. My family is also traditional fishermen. We do the same type of net fishing. We just don't do it in the marina. Because I had informed my family, it is against the marina rules and regulations, and if you do it, I have no other recourse but to arrest you. What is the authority that I have to arrest? The Port Authority is a self-sustaining agency of the government of Guam. We have our own police department. As the acting harbor master, I'm pretty much acting in a lot of capacities, absent the individual seated in that position. I must go with what's on the port rules and regulations. Now, if somebody, when this was enacted, mind you, I was the harbor master at the time. I did have a boss, and my boss as general manager, together with Tito's boss, who at the time formulated this, and all we had to do was follow it. It came as a directive from our bosses that this is what we have come to a happy medium. During this time period, the anglers and the netters were fist fighting over the marina. Well, when this came out, I'm not saying I washed my hands of it, but people in higher authority put this together. Mr. Taitono, hopefully you're right. Absent the rescinding this letter, I don't know what to do. But my general manager right now is questioning the authority that the two directors, general manager had in putting this together contrary to law. I'm just saying, Senator.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's here and testifying. And I too, like Senator Castro, we're looking for the way through. And so I think there is a way, you know, that there have been many ways to get through this, like you said, in the past. It was an amicable agreement, but actually it was much more than that, the way I look at it. We had a law on the books, of course, that gives the port authority over marinas, right? And we have a law on the books that's very, very specific as to taking of fish in the Agana Boat Basin. So because this law is very specific, I mean, of course, I mean, I think this map was drawn up so that everybody can interpret this law consistently, so that there would be no more disagreements, and it seemed to have worked for many years. Is that correct? But this law is so specific. It says fish may be taken, and I think the senators back then, and this is an old law, were trying to accommodate all the fishermen on Guam, and that's the way I read the laws of Guam. They have always tried to accommodate all the fishermen of Guam, tried to be least restrictive as possible, right? And but this law, 5 GCA 63116, specifically says fish may be taken by lawful means at any time except as prohibited by regulation made under 63127. 63127 are regulations that have to be made by the Department of Agriculture. As Tino was saying earlier, that's the regulations they're going to work on. So all the input that we've heard today hopefully will go towards those regulations, and that's when the community can have their debate whether we like this kind of fishing or that kind of fishing in this area or not, when the Department of Ag actually comes out with them. And if they have not come out with them, if that's my understanding, if I understand that correctly, that there are currently no rules and regulations prohibiting under 63127 fishing, then this law continues. It says, provided, however, that it shall be, and now by law we're setting parameters, it shall be unlawful for any person to place or maintain a dragnet, tintulu, or tekin within Agana Boat Basin proper, right? So that's where they designate the lines, and this map was clearly intended to go together with this law. Now, I agree with Mr. Olivas that perhaps for some reason there's a disconnect now, and I think we can easily reconnect that. We either adopt these by rules and regulations, the Department of Ag, or by law we adopt this to be the interpretation of this law, or the port comes out with authority that says its rules and regulations prohibiting fishing are not inconsistent with this law, right? I mean, because on the face it looks inconsistent. And unless the law, I don't have the full law in front of me that gives the port the authority to create rules and regs, but it's possible that that was created after passage of this law. But because this still exists on the books, it doesn't look like it was the intent of the legislature to change this fishing parameters in the boat basin. And just because, we've got this forum, I'm just going to continue. So it says, and further provided that angling and cast net talada fishing are the only approved methods of fishing within the Agana Boat Basin proper and within 50 feet of the western edge of the Agana Boat Basin channel on conditions as follows. And so Mr. Leave is right. We could also go in by law and interpret or define these words. But I think the map did a great job of it if that's still consistent with what everybody, before anybody adopts this map, there should, if Department of Ag was going to adopt it, there should be a public hearing on it. If the legislature was going to adopt it as the parameters, there should be a public hearing, or even the port, that there should be a public hearing on it. And there's one more prohibition on the use of talada from boat slips is prohibited, and within the channel and mooring area, the talada may be used only between the hours of 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. Within the other areas of the Agana Boat Basin, the talada may be used at any time. And so, I believe that the senators before us were very consistent with we're going to recognize traditional fishing, we're going to try to accommodate them whenever possible, and so I would like to continue in that kind of spirit of accommodating them, and if it's possible, I mean, of course, when there's a public hearing, perhaps, on this map to make it clearer, or on definitions to make it clearer, or on anything else that proceeds outside of this hearing, that perhaps the port too has interests that it wants to have recognized, like safety issues or what other interests you think might override, these existing prohibitions or designated areas. So I don't know. I'm very grateful for all the testimony today, and I think there's a way we can, hopefully remain amicable and really solve this as soon as possible, immediately.
Yeah, hopefully soon, because this has been on my head for since 2011. When I became the harbor master, and in enforcing what's on our rules and regulations, I'm protecting myself and the Port Authority, because myself, if I allow it and not enforce what's on the rules and regs, and somebody gets into an accident out there, I personally can be held liable for that. And then the Port Authority can be held liable for it too. So I hope we come up with a quick solution to this. Again, the port remains neutral on whether it's anglers or netters. Hopefully the prevailing senators can put something together and clarify this, and let's move on with our lives and do it safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. I think, thank you, Vice Speaker, for the recommendation. I definitely made note as one of the follow-up actions, probably sooner than later, to meet with Port Authority Management and your Board of Directors. I'm sure with the Calvo administration's representatives, they'll be amenable to finding some kind of common middle ground so that all parties are considered until such time the laws change where there may be some conflict between the different statutes. And there are quite a few, and I'll draw attention to them in a minute. But before I do that, I want to continue to go around and give people the opportunity before the final couple minutes of this roundtable. Mayor, did you want to say anything, sir, or? Okay. Any of the fishers, Mr. Roman? Anyone else? The back of the room, sir, please.
My name is Peter Gervasio. I'm a avid fisherman. I do all kinds of fishing, from netting to rod and reeling, you know. But, you know, we talk about Chamorro culture and all that. And we talk about the traditional fishing, right? But yet, if we talk about Agana Boat Basin, the area, how many residents are there in Agana to say who's responsible for the fishing management down in Agana? Now, they talk about this traditional fishing, and I'm going to talk to you guys out there, okay? There's other areas in Guam that you can do your traditional fishing, but yet we pick on this one area, Agana Boat Basin. A couple of weeks ago, they had a tule came in Tumon. The guy that went down to get it got a permit to go get their tule. He did his traditional fishing with no questions. Nobody bothered him. Nobody said anything. Right? But when we have traditional fishing down a boat basin, you corral the net for 8 days. You know, is that traditional? Ask yourself that, people. Is that traditional? It ain't. Okay, if you look at tradition, the village goes out, they get the fish, bring it in, and share it with the people. They don't take it down to the corner of the street and sell it for $10 a bag, right? It's like that. Okay, so when we say we
most of the fish that we do catch are given away.
No, hold on,
I say
I'm
three.
talking, not you. Let me talk first, then you can answer me.
Well, you asked me a question.
Let me talk first.
Okay.
Now, you had your talk, so let me talk now. Okay, so you say you don't sell your fish. You go down, the guy goes down to the boat basin and says, hey, man, could I get some fish? Yeah, I only got $5. The guy goes, okay, I'll give you 5 fish. That's traditional, right? Or is it all about the money? Like they say, it's not all about the money. But traditional fishing, let's talk traditional fishing. Let's do it the way they did it before. Not interpret what traditional fishing is all about. Because I'm tired of this traditional fishing. I'm Chamorro. I'm 57 years old. And I've been doing it fishing. I've fished all over the world. Alaska, Germany, United States. I've fished everywhere. Okay, so, I mean, Guam is the only one that's got very, very limited, maybe very little rules and regulation in fishing. In Saipan, you can't even drop your net unless you get permission. Okay, there's the expert out there. He'll tell you. The only time you can drop your net in Saipan is if there's a festa going on or a party for the family. And then you still got to do a permission. But you know what? Guam doesn't have or our senators or authority don't have the goal to say, let's do this. I mean, the fishing here in Guam, the inshore fishing, is really bad. Okay? There's not enough fish for inshore fishing, and you know that. Okay, you go down to all these preserves. You can't fish there unless you do it illegally. Okay? When the Atula comes in a boat basin, you know how much revenue it generates from stores, the businesses in Guam? Because what family comes down to boat basin to fish for Atula? They bring their kids. On the weekend, they set up camps so that they can fish and teach their traditional fishing to their kids. But when these netters come in and take it, all that's gone. So all the revenue of buying supplies for your fishing, your ice, your food, everything's gone. Okay? So where's the tradition of teaching our kids? But when we talk tradition here, we're only talking Agana Boat Basin. Yeah, we can fish everywhere. But the safest for rod and reelers, I think, for traditional fishing, is probably the safest. I mean, I was one of the people that was involved in putting up that platform. Okay? A lot of people say, oh yeah, that platform don't work. I fish on top of that platform every night. Come out and check me out, I'm there. I made my way to fish there. So people tell me you can't fish up there. But this thing about being so old-fashioned, they say, oh, we can't do it there because there's a rock. You know, but you see people out there, Marble Cave, throwing it out on far out the La Masa, and they have no problem. So what's the difference? So traditional fishing, yeah, let's do traditional fishing, but let's do traditional fishing the way it's supposed to be done, not your interpretation of what you think is traditional fishing. Okay, so, you know, I'm the guy, and I'll let you guys know, I'm the guy that looks boat basin and say, this is my ground. This is what I do, okay? I don't care about netters. Netters can drop their nets anywhere, okay? Because I used to net, but I don't net the way they do, okay? But I got no problems people dropping their net, no problems. But what I saw last month or last week, 2 weeks ago, when they dropped their net for 8 days, then fish flying, floating all over the place, nobody wants to be responsible. Nobody wants to be responsible. Why do those fish die? Okay? 8 days of corralling and, thousands and thousands of fish, millions of fish. But nobody, right now, this time, nobody's responsible for it. EPA says there was no poison, there was no contamination in the water. So who's responsible for all those dead fish? Was there any enforcement in looking at why these fish died? Mr. Tibbet, you made a comment on the radio about what's the difference in perceived nets? Okay, did we ever investigate the nets down there? Was it closed in the bottom? My question is, did you guys check? Because I checked the conservation officers and they said no.
I will say the day we did go down there to check, and the day we went down there was the day they were opening up the nets and letting everything out, yes.
If you read the rules and regulation, it says you drop your net, you got 6 hours to put it up, unless you're using a pristine net, right? Okay, now, if I'm not mistaken, what does a pristine net do? What do they use a pristine net for? For commercial fishing?
The only fish that a per se net is permitted for on Guam are a 2-line.
Right, but they weren't used that. They were using it as a surround net. And what's the rules and regulations of surround net? 6 hours, right? That's all. No, wrong answer. For surround net. If you didn't close the bottom, it is a surround net. If you did not close the bottom of the net, it's a surround net. So, where was the rules and regulations followed there? If we're going to keep changing this rule because somebody else comes around and says, okay, you know, we see something different, it ain't going to work. I'm the guy that fought down a boat basin with a bunch of netters, okay? I'm the guy that faced John Tau because he was down there, because he thought he could just run the place and do what he got to do, right? But the law was for us. Now, here's a story you guys don't know. John Atulai was one of them that was in our group that made the netters go away in Boat Basin for that 1 year. And what does he do? He turns around after all the netters gone away, he came in with his net. He used our group to do what he wants to do. I'm sorry to say, okay? But that's the true fact. So he comes up here and tells us about his 37 years of arrest and all the rules and regulations and, you know, Tanana and all that. I'm sorry. Let's go with traditional. Let's go with traditional. We're going to go traditional. Let's go traditional. But none of this. Okay? So, thank you for your time. And, you know, I think I went over. But go ahead. Answer your question. Answer the question.
You're fine. Thank you so much for the input. I definitely appreciate the perspective. Anybody else want to contribute as we wrap up? Yeah, please, Ms. Amesbury.
I just wanted to clarify something I said. I'm not advocating fishing permits. I'm not advocating fishing zoning. I'm just telling you that there's other ways you can give preferential rights that aren't racial. That's all I was saying.
Senator Bisco-Lee, Senator Nelson, Vice Speaker, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Castro, for hosting this roundtable. I think this is a very important discussion because it really hits home our culture and our form of sustenance. Apparently, just by sitting here and observing, the first issue is the conflict with the law, with Port Authority and their rules and regs. Now, the second issue is the fishermen's coming into agreement in the manner of how we fish and collect our fish. I just want to say that with the first issue, I think the Vice Speaker made it very clear the position of the law. And I don't think there's any confusion in the rights of where the fishermen can fish, especially if there's a drawn-out diagram that has been submitted previously. So I hope that the Port Authority reconvenes and really, I guess, takes another look at what they're doing and see where they can best spread out their assets in regulating our waters. And then perhaps I think that Senator Castro, we can host a meeting coming together the minds with all the fishermen so that we can all be together on the same page. You know, this is, yes, we will argue about different people's methods, but our culture is really to also to reconcile and to work together. And so I hope that we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Felix, did you want to say? You sure? Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's 2:40. Our next working group session will be at the Hagatnya Marina by the fishing platform tomorrow night between 5:30 and 7 p.m. Everybody's invited. It's an open forum, again, to facilitate additional discussion. And I do want to say a couple things as I close. Thank you for the recommendations. It's nice to see scientists, other advocates for traditional fishery knowledge and practice. I do also want to shore up that, you know, both Mr. Pangilinan and Mr. Roberto's sentiments rest with our good Chamorro people, and I appreciate them coming here and holding the line in terms of at least listening and being tolerant of other person's views and interpretations. I was also very happy to see Dr. Peter Hulk here from the University of Guam. It's always encouraging when you have science validating thousands of years of Chamorro traditional knowledge. Usually, I can only speak for myself. When you go to school, you assume that what you're picking up can teach you something new that you can bring home. But I'm always reminded by my father, you know, certain things he says in Chamorro that I won't say on the record, but Peter Hulk brought further validation that a lot of what our Manaina pass on to us is tested, tried and true over centuries. And I'm happy that you're able to share some of that knowledge with us, Peter, at the next work session. If you missed it earlier, he has, they're working on the consolidation of 25 years of fishery data that will, I guess, shed some light on particular types of species and or habitats. At the next meeting, perhaps not tomorrow night, but I do want to draw attention with agriculture and our friends from the other regulatory agencies on the status of the Guam Territorial Seashore Protection Commission, a permitting board, advisory committee, and the Indigenous Native Resources Task Force. And that's where we have, actually, there is no shortage of laws in the books that is meant to perpetuate Chamorro language, culture, traditional fishery, knowledge, and practice. I guess it's the promulgation and taking action on those laws, and so I'd like to follow up with you in another work session. Other than that, thank you, everybody, for participating, and have a wonderful day, and happy Labor Day to everyone in the government of Guam.